Welcome, everyone. Welcome to your monthly masterclass in the circle. This month, this is August 2024, we have a really special treat for you, and I can't wait to tell you more. Today, we have Rachel Boehm. Boehm is in fame. Boehm is in aim. Boehm is in, that's all I got. But now you're going to remember. And so, welcome, Rachel. Rachel is an expert on working with high achievers and peak performers and on keeping them from burning out, or unfortunately, if they're already burnt out, she helps them to unburn. And the way that I found Rachel was actually in the circle, which doesn't always happen. Rachel's actually working with two circle members. I shall not name them, but they love her, and so they said, "Oh my gosh, you should completely have Rachel come in and talk to the circle." They really credit her with their great progress, and so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Rachel for the hour.
Thank you so much, Linda. Hi, everyone. It's really wonderful to meet you. And I know this is a really special, sacred place. So thank you for letting me join. If helpful, as I kind of pull up some slides, because slides always, well, I was going to say they always make it fun. They actually don't always make it fun. Sometimes they make it the complete opposite of fun, but hopefully that will not be the case here. But I'm a NABO member, NABO board member. I'm out in NABO, DC. And NABO has just been an incredible place, so I'm just really excited to give back. Before we kind of go through the initial part to kick off the last half, which will be a more open discussion, just curious if how many of you in the last year have felt like you're on the edge of burnout, or you've seen a friend or a colleague start experiencing what you feel like is burnout? And thanks, Julia. Linda, yeah. I do this and I'm not immune. That's the whole point, right? Is that no one's safe from it. And there's one thing that we'll talk about is there's still a stigma depending on where you're at with even answering the question I just asked, which is really unfortunate. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. But I'd love to hear from you all, because this presentation, this discussion can go in many different ways. And I want to make sure that you get what you were hoping for here today. So if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself and answering, and or put in the chat, if you can't unmute yourself, what made you want to show up in person today? What is the biggest question you have, or the biggest repeating obstacle? When I say burnout, like preventing burnout or recovering from burnout, what comes to mind?
I'll talk if no one else
Thanks,
signs to it.
Julia.
Yeah. I found it interesting that you led with that there's a stigma to it, because I went like this. And honestly, the reason I did that is because I didn't want to admit it. I feel like I'm not allowed to have burnout, quote
Yeah.
unquote, right? Because
Yeah.
like I'm doing what I love. I'm the president of my company. Like I should
Yeah.
set the example, et cetera, et cetera. And if I experience symptoms of burnout or periods of that, then what does that say about like the rest of my staff, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to
Yeah.
admit it to myself. And so I think I was hoping, I don't know what I was hoping for today. Maybe that you would convince me I wasn't actually experiencing it. I don't know.
But I think we do experience it, and I agree with you. We're not supposed to show it in front of our staffs because we're the bosses, but it doesn't mean we don't feel it. We just try to hide from it. But I kind of started noticing when I was having it, when I finally started to get to take regular breaks, and then I'd come back and be doing so much better at work, that when I kept myself from burning out by taking those extra long weekends or traveling again or doing something to give that balance, it made a huge difference in controlling it, because our burnout is usually different than the employees, but it still happens.
Yes. Yeah. I'm so glad that you that last part that you really mentioned. And that's the thing, is that the thing that makes it challenging is that burnout can look and feel different to different people because of the number of things that cause it to occur, or that drive it to occur. you guys are hitting on some great points. So instead of me saying, oh, and we'll get into that, like, why don't I just get into it and we can, it's a nice sized group. So we can kind of make it a free flowing conversation and keep it informal, which is great. And then, like I said, we'll, after the slide portion, we can go into just a continued open discussion. So when I was thinking about, okay, we have like 30 minutes and 30 minutes. So, sometimes these talks are like 45, 50 minutes long. So it's like, what can I give them that doesn't make a topic on burnout cause burnout? Like, what can I distill down to make it really simple and actionable? Because my absolute least favorite thing in the world is to go listen to somebody tell me all these things and then never tell me what I can do about it other than like call them. That drives me crazy. And so I wanted to give you guys, like, if nothing else, do this. Like, here's 2 things you can do, right? So I decided to call this the burnout, like, bluff, like, bottom line up front, like, here's what you need to know. So, I think it's always helpful just to have a sense of where we're going, right? So again, like, hitting kind of the gist of it, really talking about how it spreads, throughout the organization and in your own life. I thought we should have fun, and Linda said it was informal. So instead of saying the business case, I said why it sucks. And then how you can start becoming burnout proof. I'll focus on you as the individual, but I do have resources for your team. So if anybody wants, stats related to the team, related to, or actions for the team for your larger organization, please let me know, because I have those, and that's always something that we can talk about. This is usually my least favorite part, like telling you about myself. But increasingly, so many people are throwing the word burnout around and hashtag I'm a burnout coach, that I think it actually really is important to just at least let you know where I'm coming from and the lens through which I've viewed, lived, and studied this. So I am a behavior change and performance coach psychologist. I am a PhD candidate, and I studied the psychological being of workers and entrepreneurs. Everything I do comes from either the lived experience of hitting the very bottom of burnout and having to switch careers out of an industry that became my identity. That was everything I thought I would ever do. I had been preparing for it my whole life. And then, the recovery was so long that it was like 18 years before I could even be a patron of the industry. And so I've lived it, I've studied it, and I've like put it into practice in the workplace. So burnout is, preventing burnout. I really do believe that work shouldn't suck or kill you, and that you shouldn't have to choose between making your living and living your life, right? Like, none of us are building a business so that we don't enjoy it at the top, right? We can't enjoy the fruits of our labor, or so that we crash and burn and take the whole thing down with us. So with that, like, here's kind of what you have to know. It feels like it happens overnight often, right? We wake up and we're like, oh my God. Kind of like, you wake up and you're like, the dryer shrunk my clothes. I gained 20 pounds overnight. Like, what happened? And it feels like it's overnight, but it's not. It's this, we say a slow burn, but that feels weird with burnout. So I say it's a slow extinguish. And the image is Dante's Inferno. I really feel like burnout, like, I'll liken it to kind of falling down Dante's Inferno, because there's this whole continuum, right? Like, it starts with just one too many yeses to everyone but yourself. And it could be for the best of reasons, right? I want to cover for my team, or I love this work so much. It could also be, I don't feel like I can say no. I have to prove myself. Whatever the reason is, we commit and we commit and we commit. And then there's a few other factors that I'll get into as well. Full burnout. So when you're at the very bottom, and you all may have heard this, it's exhaustion, it's also cynicism, and it's also reduced self-efficacy, which, if you're not familiar with that term, means you don't believe you have the resources within you or around you to do what you need to do. So when you hit like full burnout, it's experiencing all 3 of those things for an extended period of time. It's, I'm exhausted, take this job and shove it, or, for the business, right? Like, if my client calls me one more time, I'm just going to lose my mind, right? And then just like, what's the point? I'm not even doing a good job. But before we get there, it's these other little pebbles in the shoe that start to add up. It's again the work on top of the work on top of the work that start to edge out everything else. And so then different people have different warning signs, and the cynicism can come first for some people, or the exhaustion can come first, or the kind of questioning your skills. It's unfortunately not just the same track record for everyone. So I'm going to give you a few things to look at. But obviously the key then to preventing it is to start developing the self-awareness enough and the knowledge of what to look for so that you can start to notice it before you get to the very bottom, right? So far, does this resonate with anyone? Has anyone heard this before? Never heard this before? Anyone have felt anything other than the exhaustion? Because I imagine we probably all felt the exhaustion part. but the cynicism or the kind of just questioning, some folks say it's very similar to imposter syndrome. And you can put in the chat too if it's hard to unmute yourself.
I was trying to unmute, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I'll be the first one to raise my hand on,
Thanks, Michelle.
imposter syndrome, 100%.
Yeah.
I know a lot of us face that. We're doing great work and yet we still lack faith in ourselves. So yep, and the pebbles, they all add up. Yeah,
they do. When I'm talking to individual contributors, not, because I tweet this for different folks, like the running joke is like, and somebody just fix the printer, right? Like it's always the printer that's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. So then what is this barrier to the burnout awareness? What keeps us from cluing in that this is happening before we wake up and feel like it happened overnight? Most people are somewhere on that continuum, right? Like the latest is like 8 and 10 workers. And CEOs, senior leaders, and you guys talked about it, we're the top. It's not just the employees, business owners, CEOs, managers, like we're the ones that are really feeling it more actually than the individual employees. It's that idea again of the stigma, right? So if we know how awful burnout is, what keeps, and we know the costs, the personal professional costs, why do we struggle to take action before it gets too far? One is that stigma. A lot of times stats around burnout are wrapped and packaged with stats around mental health. And I understand why, and I could argue for that if I needed to. Like, I mean, if that was kind of the lens to which I view this. But the thing is that burnout is not a medical diagnosis. It's not a medical condition. It's not a mental health condition. It's a stress response. So I think it actually does a disservice to say, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Here's the latest stats on burnout, right? Or mental health and burnout are affecting the workforce. As a former journalist, I understand the push from the CFOs in the place to like get the clickbait, but it really does a disservice. It really perpetuates that stigma. We don't want to look weak because we're the boss, and also because we're the female boss, right? We have to be twice as good, twice as hard, twice as fast, tough, but not too tough. We have to navigate a very tricky place. Those unwritten rules of success still are there, right? Suck it up, buttercup. This is what you signed up for. You can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Right? I want to start changing that last saying, especially is like, well, if it's hot in the kitchen, like bring in the air conditioning, like crank it up, turn on a fan. Like you can do something to change the environment. Like, why are we just like say, oh, it's hot? Okay, like change the place, change the environment. You're the leader, you're the sandwich, you're the buffer for your team, right? So you feel like you have to take it all on and shield them. But it's hard to not internalize it when you're being the shield. Also, again, those signs are inconsistent person to person. And even for all, like the best of us, right? Say, all those things and you're like, nope, I don't need to walk around, with the like mowing the lawn while the house is on fire. Like I know how to manage all of that. Well, that's great. But sometimes your business peak and your life peak happen at the same time, even at the best of scheduling, right? And it's just like when it rains, it pours. And you think you have it, and then you just don't, right? And then lastly, we don't, because change is scary. Even change, that's for the best, it's scary. It's getting outside of your comfort zone. It's getting uncomfortable, and that triggers the stress response. And you're already stressed, and you're already feeling time pressures and maybe financial pressures. And so it's like, you're already busy, and adding one more thing to your plate feels like it's too much. Even if you think that, even if you know that that's the thing that's going to help you, it's still like too much. And so it feels like it's adding the orchestra to the deck of a sinking ship. And what I would love, if you remember nothing else, is to remember that getting support is adding life rafts. Yeah, you're adding something, but it's the thing that's going to save you. It's going to get you off the sinking ship, right? And I have a little something on behalf of my circle clients to help with that at the end. So I mentioned that burnout can look differently to different people, which is why I picked this image instead of yet another image of like a woman at the computer going, oh, I'm so stressed out and tired and blah, right? We already know that image. But what looks exactly, Linda. But you know what? When your employee or when you feel disengaged or bored or just like, whatever, that can also be a sign of burnout. It doesn't mean that like everybody who looks like they're just like tuning out is bored. It could just be like they're just exhausted, right? So some things that you might feel, experience, observe: negative reactions, a sense of failure, helplessness, procrastination, loss of motivation, withdrawal from relationships or responsibilities, starting to regularly arrive late, reduced goals and aspirations, career dissatisfaction, low organizational commitment, a high intention to leave, absenteeism, turnover, lower productivity, lower quality of work, reduced commitment to the job, increased irritability and tensions between colleagues or relationships, poor health. It can be a result of or a contributor to, so it can exacerbate it as much as it is a kind of response to burnout, which means we're getting into this big cycle. Examples of those: headaches, chronic fatigue, GI issues, muscle tension, hypertension, cold and flu episodes, sleep disturbances, substance abuse, cardiovascular problems, mental health challenges, cynicism and apathy, poor treatment of others, incivility, careless mistakes, changes in appetite, obstructive and uncooperative behavior, and lack of confidence and efficacy. So it kind of reads like, in those commercials for prescriptions, they're like, ask your doctor about this. They're like, this could change your life, except it also might kill you and cause kidney disease and cause blah, 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 blah. And like all of these, like the list of what can happen is long, and that's just part of it. Like I didn't even get into the costs to you and your business, right? So where is this like evil beast coming from? You might hear that there's 6 areas of misalignment that create the environment for burnout in the workplace or in our lives, right? And I'm focusing on kind of workplace burnout here, where burnout typically resides. I think it's a little bit simpler to just throw it into 3 buckets: work, organization, and individual. But those 6, just so you have them, it's high work demands, and that's the perception of, right? And that becomes very subjective to the person. So it's not just, oh, I've got a lot of work to do. It's the feeling of like my workload is high. I don't have the resources to do my work. It's not just time. It's the time or the amount. So somebody can be working 35 to 40 hours a week and still experience burnout. Lack of control, so no autonomy or lack of autonomy. There's an imbalance between their effort and their reward. And I don't just mean like pay or benefits, but like, thank you for that work. You did a good job. Appreciate your efforts. Lack of social support in general, or like in the workplace. Lack of fairness. So our promotions or bonuses delivered fairly, or is there a sense of like nepotism and you got to know somebody? Is somebody hired fairly to, you know, to the perception of everyone else, or is it, oh, well, they networked their way into that one, right? And then a disconnect and incongruence between the values of the person and the values of the organization. And also from what the organization says and what they do, right? So is the place walking its talk? And are the right people in the right seats, basically? Are the right people in the right organization? So when we break it down, right, obviously there are certain industries that are going to be more susceptible to burnout. You know, really anyone in sales, and I realize like all of us as business owners are in sales, but like a sales position, right? Like commission based, those are just, there's a level of insecurity there. Technology, finance, construction is huge. If there's no one in construction on here, typically that surprises people. But construction, obviously healthcare, any giving profession, places where this is like, again, like sales, for example, right? You're always on, it's all great. All your shift, it's high, the emotions are there. Blah. Similar, healthcare, you got to maintain it. I fixed you, they died, like it's all like you've got to hold it in. So if you are having to really manage those emotions, even as the leader, right? And say you're an accountant and you're the owner and the leader, right? Oftentimes you may feel like you have to control your emotions throughout the day, like more so than what somebody might say is quote normal, because you're having to shift for this one employee that does a great work, and then this other employee who's on the performance review track, and then you have the, well, I lost somebody, so now I'm the technician for this bid, and then there's the deadline for the bid, and then there's the this, and you're like constantly shifting and like dealing with the client and dealing with this other client, and your emotions are just like taking you through a loop, not because you don't know how to control them, but because you do, right? Because you know you have to for different situations, and different people need the different types of leadership or learning or approaches. So I mentioned that burnout is the stress response, right? It's an unsustainable workload, right? The workload is depleting. In the nerdy world, we call it the demands, like job demands and resources, right? So my job, I love my business. Like this is what I was building to do. I love it. It fulfills me. It gives me those quote resources by fulfilling me, right? But like there's things that I don't like about doing about it. There's the admin stuff, and there's the like, I cannot wait until I can outsource my social media. Like there are things that I just cannot wait to get rid of, right? Every place has those things. But when but you're getting enough resources, say your personal life, it's allowing you to go on vacation, or it's like, so your whole life, because we can't separate it all out, like everything is life. There's work and non-work. So are the resources enough to at least balance out the demands on you? And if they are, cool, you're probably fine. Just monitor that. If the demands are more than what what you have, right, to sustain it and support it, you're on the track to burnout, or you're on the burnout path, right? Does that kind of make sense? Like what that little teeter-totter is? I mentioned the emotional and demanding work, unrealistic deadlines, right? It took me, when I first started, like I would get so excited. I still get excited for leads, like obviously, like I think maybe we all do, right? As business owners, because it's still just a little like nod, we're on the right track. Like somebody's still paying attention to us. Yes, we're in business for like another day. But like those early times, right? You get your first like lead or whatever, and you're like doing this little small business owner happy dance, and you want to promise like, okay, great, I'll get that proposal to you within 24 hours. And they're like, you don't need to, by the end of the week is fine, right? Like they're like, calm down, you like chihuahua, right? You're just so excited and you want to you want to promise and get this out fast. And so we can even set our own unrealistic deadlines just because we feel like we need to, right? Because of the way we want to show up. frequent interruptions, constant disruptions. You have like, how many places do we have? Like, my dryer and washer are now ping at me like for like 5-minute songs to tell me they're done. Like the microwave, like there's pings everywhere, like constant interruptions, constant, no, whenever somebody asks like, hey, can I have a minute? It's going to be at least 20. Like, it's never just a minute. Again, and then I mentioned the misalignment of values and the lack of autonomy. And everybody assumes that as a business owner, like you can just have full control over your life. And we all know that that's not true. Right. So even with us, right, we don't necessarily have full autonomy unless we take, and no one does, right? But we may have less than people assume. Right. And so just do a check-in with yourself. Like, am I giving myself enough permission to control how, when, and where I work to the degree that I can? Right. Like, you can't have everything. No one can. But do you feel like you have enough of it? If not, like, where can you give yourself a little more? With the organization, inflexible policies, this is typically harder with larger organizations. This comes up a little bit more, but it's like the one size fits all approach to benefits and leaves and just the way people can work, right? Everybody's in the office because I said so, because that's the way it works for me. A culture of hyperconnectivity, right? Sometimes it's assumed. So somebody may not think that their organization has this, but because they have not set a policy saying they don't, the assumption by employees, maybe they're carrying baggage in from their last workplace, right? The assumption might be that they have to do that. So just have those clear discussions with yourself that you don't have to always be plugged in, but also with your employees, right? Like, hey, I might email you after 6, but that's just how I work. If I need you, if it's an emergency, I'll call you. I do not expect you to be writing your, quote, writing your BlackBerry, right, 24/7, 7 days a week, right? Or like, oh, I'm not going to send those emails anymore. I'm going to do them, but I'm going to schedule them to be delivered tomorrow at 9 a.m. Right? How can you kind of just clarify that? If there's a lack of growth and development, poor organizational structure, obviously then toxic workplace, insufficient resources. Now, I said I was going to mostly focus on the individual, and then here's kind of where we shift back into that, but I didn't want to not give you stuff to look at for your own organization for a reason that will really come to play the next slide. So my HR colleagues would kill me dead if I did not make this disclaimer, that there are going to be things. Do we even have does anybody from HR here? Because I like to watch their faces when I say this. Okay, cool. It becomes a really fun interplay when we're live and in person and there's somebody from HR in the room. So please do not ask certain things. Like, don't ask anything you shouldn't in conversations with your team or in hiring, obviously, but you may start to, I share just so you have a full understanding. Like, there's things you might hear around the water cooler. There's things you might know from your own life, or, hi, we're talking about work in the workplace, but you also have friends that you care about that you may be privy to some of this. So I want to give you all of the things that could contribute to making someone more susceptible to experience burnout in the same situation that does not burn someone else out, right? So with that big disclaimer, childhood experiences. So adverse childhood experiences, those create low self-esteem, limited support, vulnerabilities that, one person could be thriving while another person is like, that is just depleting them completely. So that's just something to be aware of if it's not dealt with, right? If it has not been dealt with. Type A personalities. Hi, we have a support group. Type A personalities, and yeah, Linda, both hands, right? Those like high chargers, high achievers, the always yesers, the obligers, the givers, the ideal workers, the yes person. Age, gender, marital status, children at home, just your lifestyle factors. Your way of coping. Is it kind of a run and hide, or is it I'm going to deal with it to the degree that I can and make peace with what I can't? And then just again, your private life, like do you have a lot, are you isolated? Are you lonely? Is there a lot of conflict around you? Do you have hobbies? Leisure time? I remember when I came out of grad school and I was like, what, I don't know, what do I do now? Like, besides a job, right? Like, I forgot what hobbies were. And it took me a long time to figure out like what I actually like to do for fun. Like, am I allowed to do that, or does everything have to have a purpose? And the reason I shared, so the signs you might see in the work in the organization and also with you is that burnout is contagious. Emotions are contagious, and burnout is contagious for the same reasons. And I can go into all the nerdy science with it if you want. But the thing to know is that if one person is experiencing it, it's not just one person. And if you as the leader are experiencing, it's going to count double to them. Just because of the nature, the dynamics of the role of the leader and the follower, the leader and the subordinate. And that's what this little slide is. I meant to push that. But I do have stats and more information around this if anybody wants to go deeper with anything that we're talking about today. So I mentioned why it sucks. I'll kind of move through this a little more quickly. But it really is like just to tell you that there are stats that are related to directly to burnout and indirectly with kind of those symptoms I mentioned. And if anybody wants those stats, please let me know. But I am watching the time, but I do think this will be important. So if you're able to kind of follow along and you're taking notes, on the left-hand side of your page, if you could write down your annual income. And then on the right side of your page, write down $6,032 and then $3,600. Your annual income doubled. And then this one you might need a calculator for if you're me, but 15% of your annual income. I'll put this in the chat too. If I can find my little chat button. There it is. All right, so the left column is your bank account. The right are your bills due from burnout. I don't know about y'all, but I do not like those numbers. So the 6,000 figure is the average amount a person with a chronic disease spends on healthcare costs per year. It's approximately 5 times that of a person without a chronic disease. And remember, I mentioned that burnout and chronic diseases, burnout and poor health create a cycle. In terms of chronic diseases, the most common are type 2 diabetes, back pain counts as a chronic disease, osteoarthritis, hypertension, anxiety, stress, high cholesterol, upper respiratory disorders, joint disorders other than arthritis, asthma, and coronary heart disease and other heart diseases. The $3,600 figure is the estimated loss in productivity that unhealthy habits cost per employee per year. The doubling of your income is based on the estimated costs of replacing an employee, which is 1.5 to 2 times their salary due to direct and indirect costs. And 15% of payroll budgets are lost due to burnout-driven voluntary turnover. And if there's no business without you, you should just put your business's value because you the boss. Those are annual numbers. And again, this is kind of loose math, right? Because there's so many contributing factors. But just think about 1 or 2 days. The cost of missing a work day for a full-time worker is $340 estimated by Gallup. Part-time, it's $170. I imagine for you, you're more valuable than 1 full-time worker, but let's just be conservative and say that if you miss 1 work day because of burnout or you're just not at your peak, 1 work day, I don't want to put $340 in a trash can. And there are stats showing that when somebody is burnt out, they are more likely, I can get the exact statistic, but they're over 50% more likely to take leave greater than 2 weeks because of their burnout. So like 340 times 14, not a nice number, right? So how do we not write that check? I hear all the time, right? I just feel so guilty when I self-care. And so it's easy to say, well, stop feeling guilty. It's like, well, okay, well, that's easier said than done. It's not as simple as writing yourself a permission slip. If it was, like, I don't know, like I would find something else to do, right? This is where we start to kind of do the mind games and reframe it. So you can think about it as self-investment. I like that instead of self-care, because I feel like self-care has become a little commercialized. It kind of has made it lost its meaning. Not that I don't love a good candle or face mask. You could call it performance recovery if like you're more of a sporty, if you like you have a sports background, right? Or you see, we just finished the Olympics. I'm going to be in withdrawal. It's fine. But we saw the athletes, right? Those are they are training. Those are their performance. That's how they show up. That's their thing. Well, your business is your thing. It's one way you show up. You have to recover from that. If you need to, though, call it asset protection, because we just went over the stats. You're protecting your financial investment in your business, right? And I haven't even gotten to the guilt trip of do it so that you can better take care of your family. If that works for you, I'm not knocking it, like whatever works for you. But sometimes I get frustrated because I feel like the message, especially to women, is always like, well, you should invest in yourself so you can better take care of other people. I'm like, I'm going to invest in myself because I'm a human being, I'm alive, and I deserve it. But it can take time to get there, you know? So whatever you need to do to quote, drop the guilt, start somewhere, right? So call whatever you need to. The goal, and I wrote a little article for Nabo National on this. It came out in July, I believe. If you're not ready to put yourself first, if that still feels too selfish, just try not to put yourself last 3 times a week, right? Like second to last is fine. It's a place to start, just move yourself one notch up. So how do you do that? There are 5 buckets that I typically go over with my clients over the course of our journey together. But like I said earlier, I don't want to like overwhelm y'all with do this and then do this and do this and do this. And it's just like, I have a life to run. Like I can't, like, what are you talking about? So look at your energy, pay attention, sleep, nutrition, movement. I mean, I honestly get sometimes so eye roll when people are like, well, it's these 3 buckets. And it's like, it almost starts to feel condescending, but it's the foundation for a reason. Sleep, befriending, reframing stress instead of this thing that's like terrible for you that you have to escape and avoid. It's the thing that's readying you to show up, right? Quote, make it your friend, as there was a really great TED talk about. It's an opportunity for growth. Taking those, and to your point, those micro breaks throughout the workday, kind of macro breaks throughout the year, right? Giving yourself just a minute to just take a breath. Aligning your tasks to the degree that you can so that they, like if you start to pay attention to this, you'll know when you're at your best for focused work, when you're at your best for like admin stuff, and how can you kind of shift the way you go about your day, again, to the degree that you can to take advantage of that, right? So it's kind of being able to manage your energy levels. That's how we build what I call sustainable peak performance. A lot of people are like, I'm a performance coach, peak performance. And I use that hashtag because it trends and, you got to do what you got to do. But nobody wants to be at their best for a day. End of story, right? I want to be at my best like 80% of the time through the duration of my career. And the only way I do that is by doing this, right? By protecting those assets, which is me. And then the very last thing, like not to sound like the L'Oreal commercial, but like you're worth it, right? just remind yourself. And it sounds, again, it may sound a little corny, but I didn't tell you, maybe amazing if I was like that genius enough where I told you something mind blowing that you've never heard before. But like, we've all heard eat better, sleep, managers, like we've all heard it. It's not the information that's the problem. It's the not doing it consistently that's hard. Because at the end of the day, we have to answer this question. And self-worth is built through action. By achieving a little bit each step of the way. So when you start to wonder and doubt whether you can start doing this or whether it is worth it, or if you should not feel guilty, remember that the only way to get better at it is to just do it, right? And so here's a quick recap, and then I'll give you this little gift I keep alluding to help you do that. Most people, as I said, are somewhere on this burnout continuum. Most people do not realize that they are, for all the reasons that we talked about. Change is scary. There's a stigma. The fish is the last one to realize it's in water. You're already busy, and adding one more thing feels like too much. And because objective self-awareness is so hard, arguably impossible. Eyes see out, not in. So there's a really great analogy for like coaches and therapists. They're the lighthouse. They're a temporary guide on the journey to help the captain, that's you, of your ship, your life, kind of reorient themselves on the journey. So getting support is not adding these like monster waves to the journey, right? Which is what change can feel like. It's getting the lighthouse to help you see better through the storm, to figure out where the other boats are, right? To see where the calmer waters are so that you can reorient yourself on that path and navigate back to where you were trying to go. So with that, on behalf of my circle clients, I was able to do this presentation, this discussion, short. We're going to move into the open. No matter what, though, it's going to be short. It was a lot. And also not a lot, right? Because it was kind of hitting the highlights. And any presentation is going to be somewhat general. And it can be really hard. We're all in unique situations to contextualize it and figure out how to apply and get started. So if you pull out your phones, and I'll put the link in the chat, and Linda will also have it. I'm able, thanks to my clients, to give you everybody on here that listens to the replay, a 30-minute strategy coaching call to help you kind of take the general from today and apply it so it's more immediately actionable in your life, like based on your circumstances. So I'll go back to the slide really fast, but I want to leave you with this one quote, because if you're like me and some of my clients, you're a systems person as well. Oftentimes we see this quote and it's about the employees and the organization. But remember, it's true for us too, like our own lives. When I work with my clients, we talk a lot about creating their SOP for daily life. So your system, your environment, your choices, those habits that you build that become sticky, that's your system. And no matter how amazing you are and wonderful you are and how much you know all of this stuff, if your system isn't supporting your journey to get where you want to go, you're not going to get there. So now everybody unmute yourself. Let's talk through it, ask questions, throw stuff in the chat. I'll put this back up so people have more access, more time to access it. Any questions, anything that you want me to go deeper into that I didn't, anything at all?
Or you can just unmute yourself so we can hear your dogs bark.
Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah. My parents are visiting. They're downstairs with their dog. So your dog might turn off, dog barks are contagious also. So have a chorus. Let me ask this. Is anybody seeing it? Everybody probably has different size businesses here. And so, but for those that have employees, are you guys seeing it in your employees at all? Or has it affected the team? Is it something that you're dealing with, something that you're hoping to prevent?
Some of my more senior team do occasionally have burnout, and we're usually able to address it together. Fortunately, they feel comfortable enough with me to come to me when they're feeling it, or I notice it, sort of pull it out of them a little bit. But I've been fortunate enough to be able to have enough of a relationship with them to have them not try to hide it from me, so we can figure out how to work through it. Yeah. Now more junior staff, that's different, but my more senior staff have been with me for 7 to 12 years now. So we know each other pretty well. I can read most things on their faces when they walk into the room, because there's just a bunch of history with them.
Yeah.
One of my staff can read it on my face. The rest of them are oblivious, but I have one female director and 3 male directors, so you can guess which one can read my face, but
yeah, definitely. No, but that's tremendous, Anne, because a lot of folks like that's not the case. So I really commend you on developing those relationships to that point.
I've been very lucky.
Yeah. Kathy has a question.
Yeah, this is pretty short term, but I don't know if others experience this as well. Between now and November, I would say just broadly, some of the team gets sort of an emotional burnout. And I was wondering what your thoughts or feedback would be on that.
Is it related to kind of that end of year push, or is it more of the election? Because we see both.
I would say more external factors. I mean, maybe election be part of a whole milieu that happens sort of externally.
Yeah, because it can be like, October financials, it could be the election, it could be, oh my God, the holidays, it can be all of the above, to your point, right? And so, it's like the whole package. I have like a 2-part answer is what I'm trying to not say, but not so well. So my first thought is I want to think more on this to give you back something beyond what I'm going to say here. Right, Kathy? So I want to think a little bit more on some different resources to give you, because I feel like what I am going to say, even though it might be the main thing, is like, if I were you, I would be so annoyed with it. So it's just to monitor it. This is where you can start tapping into end of year funds with your benefits to see, okay, can we do a lunch and learn on like stress management or whatever? Or if I do that, is it going to cause more stress because I've taken an hour away from their work? Right. A lot of folks this is when we start seeing health fairs in October, and I'm like, probably the worst month to do it. But somewhere along the line, everybody decided October was the wellness month or the wellness month. Is this where you could, though, tap in end of year funds to secure more support for the coming year? So the biggest thing I would say is just listen, watch, consider the rhythm. And this is where I would really love to chat with you more directly to get some insights into what is your business, what is the pace of your business, right? What industry are you in? So I can give you something a little more specific, because the general answer is what I just said, but there's more things you can do. I just don't have all of the specifics to give you something beyond that, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So I'd love to chat with you more offline and help you with something that's a little more concrete. Anyone else have any questions, ahas, things that you disagree with even? I'm okay with that. Yeah.
I have a curiosity. Just as I'm looking at the beautiful faces that are on this call today, and I know all of you pretty well by now, but then it just makes me curious, right? What are some examples? What are some things that you are actually doing for yourself? I mean, it's one thing to, shift your mindset and, okay, I'm not going to feel guilty about this, or I'm going to, but what is your thing that you're doing actively today
I'll start. I'll start because I was 30 minutes late. This is Kathy. I was 30 minutes late because I hate missing these, but I thought to myself, this was the only opening they had, and this is the perfect time to be late. I had a facial, I'll have to admit.
Yes, I love it.
There's no better time for me to be late to Linda than this particular topic, so that's mine. But I have to admit, it was a very last minute decision because at first I thought I shouldn't, but I'm like, I'm just gonna do it.
I fully support that. I also tell people, please don't ever, like, if the only time for our session was like when you need to have lunch, or sometimes like we can't control when we get hungry. I don't care, eat in front of me. Like, I'm never going to stand on your way of that, right? Take the call on the walk. Like, do what you need to do. Kathy, I love that. There's little things that you can do too. Is anybody doing anything else, or anybody need ideas of like something they can do in 30 seconds? Karen, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I had physical therapy this morning. I got hurt mountain biking a few weeks ago. Mountain biking is one of my stress relievers and self-care, but it was from 8 to 9, and instead of coming straight home, right next to my PT place, there's a coffee place. So I brought my laptop instead of coming home, and I've got 2 dogs that don't like it when I sit down, and I'm surprised they've been sitting for the last hour, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a break from the dogs. It's my work at home day. And I went to the coffee shop and worked there instead and bought myself breakfast. And so that was something I did for self-care.
Awesome. Anyone else have anything?
I usually will let myself take whatever little extra thing that comes up here and there, like whether it's sneaking out for a date for lunch because I'm single, or that last minute going, you know what, I don't have any in-person meetings. I'm going to work from home today and just take a little bit easier a day. I tend to not have a individual single thing that I do, but I tend to give myself those moments when they come up.
Awesome. And thank you.
And Bridget.
Oh, I was just going to say, it seems like there are a lot of people who go physical first, because at least controlling yourself is easier than controlling the world around you. And so starting last October, I started well before that, but I finally got my ball rolling in October. And so I've been rotating between yoga and hot yoga, because everything I do has to be just a little extreme. Go fig. And then Orange Theory. And so I have my meditative, relaxing, but I also have something that's going to help me get into better physical shape, just so I feel like I can keep up with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I went and moved everything that I could offline and into person, just so that I could get more face-to-face time with things, because I felt like I was 2D for far too long.
Yeah. That's a wonderful example of, like, you know, I said, okay, if you do nothing else, right, like start to know your energy levels. And that means like what gives and what takes. And, you know, for some people, like they need like too much alone time is a trigger. For other people, too much social time is a trigger, right? For me, like I'm an extrovert, but like I need my space too, right? And so it's kind of knowing the balance, Bridget. So I love the changes that you made, right? For workouts, like for some people, it's that needs to be my solo. Like I don't like to work out with other people. Like don't invite me. I won't go. I mean, I appreciate it's sweet, but like I won't go. Like that's my sacred time in the morning. Other people, it's like they won't do it without other people. Like that's their social time. And so it's just kind of like tapping into what you need and when you need it. What type of stress relief do you need right now? Do you need the yoga zen, or do you need the Orange Theory? I'm going to crush it. Right. And to your point, do I need some like, okay, a lower pace day, or can I do a higher pace day? Like where can I take advantage of these shifts? And I think we have a few more minutes. Linda, do you have any closing announcements? If not, I can think of one more question, but I want to check in with you first.
I do not, but I'm so glad to hear that there are things that individual people are doing, and not just that you're doing them, but that you know that you're doing them, because that's a trap that I have fallen into myself. Is I will do something and then I will immediately forget that I even did it, because like that wasn't, you know, really associated with the goal that I was trying to get done that day. And the fact that I went and did this other thing to take care of myself, as soon as I was done doing it, I just pushed it off out of my mind and I didn't think about it anymore. And I didn't really get any credit for it. And so at the end of the day, it didn't really help me because I didn't call it what it was and really bring it inside.
If you're like me and lists are your love language and checking thing off your to-do list or your love language, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but not. There is a free app called Strides, Strides. And I don't know if I can do this very well, but if you'll see it's the top right, it looks like that. This is iPhone. I don't know about Android. But it's called Strides. It's free, and you can add your goal to it. And so if you don't already have a tracker, right, you can add like, okay, my goal is water, my goal is meditation, my goal is Orange Theory and yoga at least twice a week, like whatever your goal is, you can just add that. So like some apps, they don't allow that type of customization and flexibility. You can say, this is my goal for 3 days this week. This is my goal for 6 days this week. In the early iteration of my practice, I was using an app just for my practice. And I realized like that's building dependence. I don't want my clients to be dependent on me. I want to teach them how to use these other tools, like ones they may already have or ones that they can find. And so that's one that if my clients don't already have something, I'll recommend to them and I use myself. So I focus on one goal, right, for several months until it becomes routine. And then I'll like change it out and do another goal. But if you do something and you want credit for it, take your credit, put it on and track it and look at that list, add it to your list and cross it off.
I love it.
Yeah. Linda, thank you so much.
Yes. Rachel, this is absolutely fantastic and such a good reminder and so good to bring it to the front of our attention because you're right, it sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
And by the time you know it's there, it's already there. And unless you paid attention along the way. And it's not a life sentence. It's not a death sentence. So yeah, we can all help each other beyond Miraval, of course. Right, Julia? And Michelle? And Bridget and Kathy? Yeah. And Anne's going with us next time. Yeah, it's not a once a year activity, which is why we brought it in halfway through the year, past Miraval, to remind everybody, please continue to take good care of yourselves. Not so you can take care of other people, but because we love you. The end.
Period. Awesome. Well, thank you again for the opportunity to join your circle today. I really appreciate it. And I hope there was just a little kernel that can stick with you guys. And if you need me, reach out anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rachel.